I never thought I would see her again. Not like that. Not with her eyes filled with fear, lying on that operating table, looking at me like I was her last hope. The same woman who once told me I was not good enough for her son, because I was just a nurse. Just a nurse. Those words burned in my memory for years. But let me start from the beginning, because this story needs to be told exactly as it happened. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I met Daniel. I was 26 years old, working the evening shift at City General Hospital. I had just finished my nursing degree 2 years before, and I was proud of what I had accomplished. My parents were immigrants who worked 3 jobs between them to put me through school. They taught me that honest work was the most valuable thing in the world. That day, Daniel came into the emergency room with his friend who had broken his arm playing basketball. I was the one who took care of the paperwork and helped prep his friend for the doctor. Daniel kept looking at me. He had these warm brown eyes and a smile that made me forget I was exhausted from a 12-hour shift. Before they left, he asked for my number. I gave it to him. That was the beginning of everything. We dated for 8 months before he introduced me to his mother. 8 months of happiness. Daniel was an architect, working for a prestigious firm downtown. He was kind, funny, and he treated me like I was the most important person in his world. But he kept postponing the meeting with his mother. He would say she was busy, or traveling, or not feeling well. I started to suspect something was wrong. One night, after we had dinner at my small apartment, I asked him directly, "Why are you avoiding this?" He looked uncomfortable. He told me his mother had very specific ideas about who he should be with. She came from money, old money, and she expected him to marry someone from the same background. A lawyer, maybe. A doctor. Someone she could show off at the country club. My heart sank. I looked at him and asked, "Does she know what I do for a living?" He nodded slowly. "And she has a problem with it?" He did not answer, but his silence told me everything. I should have walked away right then, but I was in love. Stupidly, completely in love. I thought maybe if she met me, she would see that I was a good person, that I made her son happy, that what I did for a living did not define my worth as a human being. So I agreed to meet her. Daniel set up a lunch at an expensive restaurant in the financial district, the kind of place where the menu does not have prices and the waiters wear white gloves. I bought a new dress with money I should have saved. I wanted to make a good impression. I wanted her to like me. Margaret Henderson arrived 15 minutes late. She walked in wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her jewelry was understated but clearly expensive. She looked at me the way someone looks at a stain on their carpet. Daniel stood up to greet her, kissed her cheek. He introduced us. I extended my hand. She looked at it for a moment before shaking it, her grip cold and brief. We sat down. The lunch was torture. She asked me questions that sounded polite on the surface but were designed to cut. Where did your parents come from? What do they do? Oh, a nurse. How nice. Do you work in a doctor's office? When I explained I worked in the emergency room at City General, she raised her eyebrows. That must be very demanding. Do you have time for a social life? For family? I tried to answer gracefully. I talked about how rewarding my work was, how I helped people on their worst days, how every shift taught me something new about human resilience. She listened with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. Then came the moment I will never forget. We were waiting for dessert. Daniel had excused himself to take a phone call from work. Margaret leaned forward, folded her hands on the table, and looked at me with those cold blue eyes. "I think you are a nice girl," she said. Her voice was soft, almost kind, which made what came next even worse. "But you need to understand something. My son has a future ahead of him. He comes from a family with expectations, with standards. He needs a partner who can match his ambitions, who can open doors for him, who understands his world. You seem like a hard worker, and that is admirable. But being a nurse, well, it is a service job, is it not? You take orders from doctors. You clean up after patients. It is not the kind of profession that commands respect in our circles. Daniel needs someone who can stand beside him as an equal, not someone he has to explain or apologize for." I felt like she had slapped me. My face got hot. My hands started shaking. I wanted to throw my water in her face. I wanted to scream at her, but I was raised better than that. I took a deep breath. I looked at her and said, with as much dignity as I could manage, "I save lives. Every single day, I am the person standing between patients and death. I hold their hands when they are scared. I catch mistakes before they become tragedies. I work 16-hour shifts without complaining because someone needs me. And I do not need anyone to explain or apologize for me, because what I do matters. She smiled that tight smile again. Of course, dear. I am sure it does. But you must see that it is not quite the same thing, is it? Daniel came back to the table. He could sense the tension but did not know what had happened. The rest of the lunch was awkward and painful. When we finally left, Margaret kissed Daniel goodbye and ignored me completely. In the car, Daniel asked what happened. I told him everything. He looked devastated. He apologized over and over. He said his mother was old-fashioned, that she would come around, that she just needed time to get to know me. But I could see the doubt in his eyes. I could see him wondering if maybe his mother was right. Our relationship changed after that lunch. Daniel became distant. He stopped talking about the future. He stopped saying he loved me. 3 weeks later, he broke up with me. He said it was not about his mother, but we both knew that was a lie. He said we wanted different things, that we were moving in different directions. I cried. I begged him to reconsider, but he had made up his mind. His mother had won. I threw myself into work. I picked up extra shifts. I volunteered for the hardest cases. I studied constantly, taking every certification course I could find. I specialized in surgical nursing, spending years learning the intricacies of operating room procedures. I was good at it, better than good. I became one of the most requested surgical nurses at City General. Surgeons specifically asked for me because I was fast, precise, and I could anticipate their needs before they even spoke. I never made mistakes. I could not afford to. Every day in that operating room, I proved Margaret Henderson wrong. Not to her, because she was not there to see it, but to myself. 5 years passed. I heard through mutual friends that Daniel had gotten engaged to a corporate lawyer, someone his mother approved of, someone from their world. It hurt, but by then the pain was dull and distant. I had built a life I was proud of. I had my own apartment. I had respect from my colleagues. I had saved countless lives. I was not just a nurse. I was a damn good nurse, and that mattered. Then one evening, everything changed. I was scrubbing in for an emergency surgery. A woman in her late 50s had been brought in with acute appendicitis that had progressed to peritonitis. It was serious, life-threatening. The surgeon, Dr. Rivera, was one of the best in the hospital. We had worked together hundreds of times. I was laying out the instruments, preparing the surgical field, when the patient was wheeled in. She was sedated but not fully under yet, and I recognized her immediately. Margaret Henderson. My heart stopped. I actually took a step back from the table. Dr. Rivera looked at me with concern. "You okay?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Margaret's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. She was groggy from the pre-surgery medication, but she saw me. I watched recognition dawn on her face. Her eyes went wide. "No," she whispered. "Not you. Anyone but you." Dr. Rivera frowned. "Do you two know each other?" I kept my voice professional. "We have met before." Margaret tried to sit up, but the anesthesiologist gently pushed her back down. She looked at Dr. Rivera with panic in her eyes. "I want a different nurse. Please, I need someone else. She is not qualified. She is just a nurse. Just a nurse." Those words again. Dr. Rivera looked at me, then at Margaret. He had worked with me long enough to know exactly how qualified I was. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "you are in no position to choose your surgical team right now. You have a severe infection. We need to operate immediately, or you could die. This nurse," he gestured to me, "is one of the best I have ever worked with. You are lucky to have her." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "You do not understand," she said, her voice weak. "She hates me. She will let me die." I felt anger rise in my chest, hot and fierce, but I pushed it down. I walked closer to the operating table. I looked Margaret Henderson directly in the eyes. I said, "I took an oath. I swore to care for every patient regardless of who they are or how they have treated me. I do not let people die out of spite. I am a professional. And whether you believe it or not, whether you respect it or not, I am very good at my job. Now let us put you under so we can save your life." The anesthesiologist administered the medication. Margaret's eyes closed. Her body relaxed. And then it was just another surgery. Except it was not. My hands were steady as I passed instruments to Dr. Rivera. My focus was absolute. But inside, I was at war with myself. Part of me wanted to prove her wrong so badly it hurt. Part of me wanted her to see, really see, what I was capable of. And a tiny, ugly part of me that I am not proud of wanted her to suffer. Just a little. Just enough to understand what it felt like to be dismissed and humiliated. But I did not let that part win. Because she was right about one thing, even if she meant it as an insult. I was a nurse. And nurses do not get to pick and choose who deserves care. We show up. We do the work. We save lives. Even when it is hard. Even when it hurts. The surgery was complicated. The infection had spread more than the scans had shown. Margaret's appendix had ruptured, and there was contamination throughout her abdominal cavity. Dr. Rivera worked meticulously, and I was right there with him every step of the way, anticipating his needs, handing him the right instrument before he asked, monitoring her vitals, catching a bleed before it became a problem. Hours passed. My feet ached. My back hurt. But I never faltered. This was what I was trained for. This was what I was good at. Finally, Dr. Rivera closed the last suture. He stepped back from the table, pulled off his gloves, and let out a long breath. "Good work, everyone," he said. Then he looked at me specifically. "Especially you. That was textbook perfect." I nodded, too exhausted to say anything. Margaret was moved to recovery. I finished cleaning up the operating room, my movements automatic after years of practice. I did not go see her. I did not want to. I went home, took a shower that lasted 40 minutes, and collapsed into bed. 2 days later, I was back at work for my regular shift. I was checking on post-op patients when one of the recovery nurses found me. She said Margaret Henderson was asking for me. My stomach tightened. I did not want to go, but I was curious. What could she possibly have to say? I walked to her room slowly. She was sitting up in bed, still pale and weak, but alive. When she saw me, something changed in her face. It was not quite shame, but it was close. I stood in the doorway. "Did you need something?" My voice was professional, distant. She looked at her hands. Then she looked up at me. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly. "The doctors told me how serious it was. They said if the surgery had not gone perfectly, I might not have made it. They said you were extraordinary." I did not respond. I just waited. She took a shaky breath. "I also wanted to apologize for what I said before the surgery. And for," she paused, "for how I treated you all those years ago. That lunch, the things I said about your profession. I was wrong." I stepped into the room, closed the door behind me. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, "You were not just wrong about my profession, Mrs. Henderson. You were wrong about me as a person. You decided I was not good enough for your son based on my job title. You did not care that I was kind, or that I loved him, or that I worked hard. You saw me as less than you because I chose to dedicate my life to helping people instead of making money or climbing social ladders. You humiliated me. You made me feel small, and you got exactly what you wanted. Your son left me. I hope the lawyer he married lives up to your standards." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly. "You are right," she whispered. "I judged you unfairly. I was a snob. I was cruel. And I am sorry. Truly." I watched her cry. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me felt nothing at all. I said, "Your apology does not change what happened. It does not give me back those years with your son. It does not erase the damage you did to my self-worth. But I accept it because holding on to anger is exhausting. And I am tired. I did my job. I saved your life. Not because you deserved it, but because that is who I am. That is what nurses do. We care for people even when they do not care about us." She wiped her eyes. "Is there anything I can do to make this right?" I thought about it. Then I said, "Yes. Stop judging people based on their jobs. Stop teaching your son and people like him that some professions are beneath them. Start recognizing that the people who serve you, who take care of you, who work jobs you consider less prestigious, are just as valuable as anyone in your country club. Respect does not come from a title or a salary. It comes from how you treat others." She nodded again. "I will. I promise I will." I left her room. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated. I just felt tired and, strangely, at peace. I had spent 5 years carrying the weight of her words, letting them shape how I saw myself. But standing in that operating room, doing what I do best, I had finally proven to myself that she was wrong. Not to her, to myself, and that was what mattered. A month later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Margaret. She wrote about how the surgery had given her time to reflect on her life, her choices, her prejudices. She wrote about conversations she had with Daniel, about how she had pressured him to leave me, about how he had been miserable with the lawyer and they had divorced after 2 years. She wrote that she had started volunteering at a free clinic, helping however she could, seeing firsthand the work that nurses and healthcare workers do. She wrote that she was ashamed of who she had been and was trying to become someone better. At the end of the letter, she asked if I would ever consider meeting with her again, not as a patient and nurse, but as two people trying to understand each other. I put the letter in a drawer and did not respond. Maybe someday I would, but not yet. 6 months after that, I ran into Daniel at a coffee shop. It was awkward at first. We made small talk. He looked older, tired. He asked how I was doing. I told him about my work, about the surgical cases I had been part of, about a teaching position I had been offered at the hospital. He listened with something like regret in his eyes. "My mother told me what happened," he said finally. "She told me you saved her life, that you were incredible." I shrugged. I was doing my job. He shook his head. "No, you went above and beyond. For someone who hurt you deeply, that takes a kind of strength I do not think I have." I looked at him. The man I had loved so much felt like a stranger now. I said, "Your mother is not the only one who hurt me, Daniel. You made a choice. You chose her approval over me. That was your decision and you have to live with it." He nodded, looking down at his coffee. "I know. I have regretted it every day since. But by the time I realized what I had lost, you had moved on. And you deserve someone who would not let his mother make decisions for him. You were right to move on." We talked a little more. He told me about his work, about traveling, about trying to figure out who he was outside of his mother's expectations. When we said goodbye, there was a finality to it, a closing of a chapter. I wished him well, and I meant it, not because I wanted him back, but because I had learned something important in those years after our breakup. Forgiveness is not about letting people off the hook. It is about releasing yourself from the prison of anger and pain. I had forgiven Daniel. I had even, in a way, forgiven Margaret. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Today, I am still a nurse. I am still in the operating room, saving lives, doing work that matters. I have trained dozens of new nurses, teaching them not just the technical skills, but the emotional resilience you need in this profession. I have been there when patients took their first breath after being revived. I have held hands of dying patients when their families could not be there. I have celebrated victories and mourned losses. And every single day, I am proud of what I do, because being a nurse is not just a job. It is a calling. It is a commitment to show up for people in their most vulnerable moments and give them everything you have. Margaret Henderson taught me something valuable, even though she did not mean to. She taught me that other people's opinions of me do not define my worth. She taught me that dignity comes from within, not from external validation. She taught me that the best revenge is not cruelty or bitterness, but living well and doing good work. When she looked at me on that operating table, terrified and helpless, she finally understood what I had been trying to tell her all along, that nurses are not less than doctors. We are partners in healing. We are the ones who catch you when you fall. We are the ones who fight for you when you cannot fight for yourself. We are the backbone of healthcare, and without us, the whole system would collapse. So if you are watching this and you are a nurse, or a teacher, or a social worker, or anyone in a profession that people sometimes look down on, I want you to hear this. Your work matters. The fact that you care for others, that you serve others, that you sacrifice your comfort for someone else's well-being, that makes you extraordinary. Do not let anyone make you feel small because of what you do. Do not let anyone tell you that service is beneath dignity. The truth is, service is the highest form of dignity. It is what makes us human. And if you are watching this, and you have ever judged someone based on their job, if you have ever dismissed someone because they do not have the right title or make enough money or move in your social circles, I want you to think about Margaret Henderson lying on that operating table. Think about who she needed in that moment. Not a corporate lawyer, not a country club member, a nurse, someone she had considered beneath her, someone whose work she had mocked. That person saved her life. Remember that the next time you are tempted to look down on someone. I still think about that surgery sometimes. I think about the look in Margaret's eyes when she recognized me, the fear, the desperation, the realization that her life was literally in my hands. And I think about my hands, steady and sure, doing what they were trained to do, saving her, not because she deserved it, but because that is who I am. That is what nurses do. We show up. We do the work. We save lives, even when it is hard, even when it hurts, even when the person we are saving once tried to destroy us. That is the power we have. Not the power to harm, but the power to heal. Not the power to judge, but the power to care. And that power, that choice to be better than the hurt that was done to us, that is what makes us truly strong. That is what makes us heroes, in our own right. So thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me. And thank you for understanding that being a nurse is not just what I do. It is who I am. And I have never been prouder of anything in my life. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been judged unfairly because of your profession? Have you ever had to prove yourself to someone who dismissed you? Leave a comment below and tell me your story. I read every single one, and your experiences matter. They inspire me and remind me that I am not alone in this fight for respect and dignity. And if you found value in this story, if it resonated with you, please subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another story, because I have so many more to share. Stories of pain, yes, but also stories of power. Stories of people who refused to be broken by judgment and cruelty. Stories of triumph over adversity. Your support means everything to me. And make sure you watch the next video, where I share another chapter of my life, another moment where I had to choose between bitterness and grace. Trust me, you do not want to miss it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are enough, exactly as you are. Your work matters. Your life matters. Never let anyone tell you otherwise.